Okay, so letter from Birmingham jail, you got that. So the next thing that's gonna happen later that year in August is I Have a Dream speech, which um I'm gonna let you watch it. I'm gonna let you watch a little bit of it, not all 17 minutes, because every American should hear this. Hopefully, you've had a teacher at some point let you listen to this, but if not, we're going to listen to it. It is one of the best speeches ever given in American history. Um, the cool thing about this speech is at first he starts, doing your typical speech. He had written it down. He had an idea of what he was going to say. Well, there's this man standing behind him, and he's friends with Martin Luther King, and he kind of gets up behind him and he goes, Martin, hey, tell him about the dream. And you kind of see Martin Luther King just kind of stop for a second, kind of look away. He pushes his papers to the side, and all of a sudden, he just starts doing this crazy, impromptu, like telling it like it is. It was so heartfelt. You can hear the quivering in his voice because he's so emotional. I mean, he's a black preacher. It's amazing. You can hear that passion coming out in his voice. And the speech, the I Have a Dream, was he had a dream that there's going to be a world one day where racism and bigotry will not exist, and he believes that all races, like he says, little white girls and little, black boys, and like they'll be able to be friends with each other. We can live in harmony with one another, and that's what his speech is about. So I'm going to skip to the next slide, but Miss Walker, make sure you show that to them. And in this speech, he talks about Georgia and Chattanooga. So just I want you to listen to that part because it's so good. You can just hear his voice change, and that's what I want you to pay attention to. Well, oh no, actually, I do want to show you this real quick because I want to show you a Randolph, a Philip Randolph, right here, a Philip Randolph, right here. There he is. So remember, he was the one who said he wanted to have a march on Washington during World War II. But now he actually helped Martin Luther King plan this. 20 years later. So okay, so because I have a letter from Birmingham jail, and definitely because of the I Have a Dream speech, Congress is going to have to do something. You just had hundreds of people, thousands of people march on Washington in their backyard. Obviously, you got to do something, okay? So, Congress is going to create the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and really, Kennedy is the one who kind of wrote this law, but he didn't get to get it passed, before he died. So, um, Congress and Lyndon B. Johnson will get the one. They will be the ones that pass this one, and this will end racial segregation in all public places. So once this law gets passed, you do not see, white and colored bathrooms. You don't see separated restaurants or movie theaters or libraries or water fountains. All of that is gone. It is just one water fountain, or everybody can sit in the restaurant together. So this was a huge, huge, huge piece of legislation that got passed. And this right here is Martin Luther King shaking hands with Lyndon B. Johnson. And of course, the South is going to keep trying to jump through loopholes. So even though the Civil Rights Act got passed, they're still going to keep trying things to limit the rights of blacks, and they're going to do this through the voting polls. The South is actually going to make it to where you have to pass a literacy test in order to be able to vote. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this literacy test. It wasn't really if you could read or not. It was if you had me for government last year, or Miss Meyer, you've probably taken the literacy test. And I'll let you take it after the EOC if you haven't. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's the silliest thing ever. It like none of us could pass it. Like honestly, it was set up for you to fail, and really, the person who was grading it, it was so subjective that they could be like, nope, all these are wrong. So it's just one of those things that the South was always trying to find a loophole to limit the freedoms or disenfranchise blacks. And finally, Congress and Lyndon B. Johnson create the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and said you cannot use literacy tests to be able to vote. Like that no, you can't do that anymore. This was pretty much us giving the middle finger to the South. Like, get over it. You let them vote. They have the 15th Amendment. Just let them vote. Or if you don't do this, if you don't get rid of the literacy test, we will send the federal government down there to oversee your elections. And does any state want the federal government coming down here to babysit them? I hope everybody said no. Okay, so that was African American rights. You also have Hispanic rights that are being protested during this time. Cesar Chavez was a influential protester. He was a leader of the United Farm Workers in California. So where you've got this African American stuff going on in the South, you've got issues with the Hispanics out in California in the West, and what they were going through was similar. But they were migrant farmers, which means they would farm area, farmland, and then they would go to another farm. And every harvest they would rotate farms. And the people that were, providing them these jobs, they didn't really have anything. They got paid really crappy, terrible wages. And then their water, like they had terrible water that wasn't always clean. The homes that they lived in was like, I mean, I'm talking third world country kind of stuff, guys. And so Cesar Chavez will lead, protesting. And this United Farm Workers, this is a labor organization, like we've talked about, during Rockefeller's days. Um, so he leads that for the Mexican Americans who are working on those migrant farms. Okay, so there's your protesting. You're going to do a reading on Cesar Chavez here in just a second, so you'll have a little bit more information on him. So there is your key terms for the day. I will talk to you tomorrow.